Welcome back here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Jordan Woodruff broadcasting from Kansas City. Got the semifinals coming up tonight in the Big 12 tournament. And we'll see if West Virginia can stay alive another day. It's a win or go home for them. So it's the same way for Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, though, fell short. 21 points they were down, able to come back, got the lead, and then lost Desmond Bain in the corner for a three. And Bain hit that. Oklahoma State had the one more shot. Couldn't get it to hit, and they are done, and nothing going on. I think West Virginia, regardless, they are going to play in the CBI, so they're going to have some postseason play. They'd much rather cancel their CBI game on Tuesday and be in the NCAA tournament. But we'll have to wait and see on that. As we know, nobody's won 4 games in 4 days here at the Big 12 tournament. All right now, Nathan Ruiz joins us, and a guy that just recently got called up to the big leagues, and we'll get more on that coming up here shortly. But Nathan, man, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's good to have you on. And kind of started off, it had to be kind of bittersweet the last few days. You're moving on to something else, but at the same time writing your what appears to be maybe your last Oklahoma State beat stories.
Yeah, it's a weird transition for sure. I'm heading out to Baltimore in the next couple of weeks to cover the Orioles for the Baltimore Sun. That's a really exciting opportunity, but at the same time, I went to school at Oklahoma State, now covered the Cowboys for the last 14 months or so for the Oklahoman. So to leave that behind is really strange. And yeah, like you said, it was weird these last few days knowing that whatever stories I might write, especially out there in Kansas City, could be my last on the beat.
Well, yeah, and people don't realize, there for the college paper, it's been more than just a year, right? I mean, you've covered the Oklahoma State sports side of things for quite a while now.
Yeah, covered, the last 5 or 6. Everyone but Josh Holliday's first year on the OSU baseball beat. Covered Mike Gundy for several years. My first year on the beat was that 2014 season. I was on the beat for the Ocali for Travis Ford's last season. So I've got to see a lot of different things at Oklahoma State the last few years. So it's definitely kind of a bittersweet deal, leaving that all behind, but I'm definitely excited about what's to come.
Bring up the Oklahoma State basketball side of things right now, and I kind of asked this. I know you guys asked as well. They're disappointed that there's no postseason play, but, man, lots of optimism around this Oklahoma State team. And I know you probably got the feeling whoever, comes in as the next beat guy for Oklahoma State there at the Oklahoman, they may have some good stuff to write about, hopefully some NCAA tournaments and more. There's a lot of optimism around Mike Boynton and this Cowboy team, especially – with their willingness to fight and the effort put forth this year in really a bad situation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reason for fans to be optimistic about what's to come. Obviously, you're expected to return all 7 scholarship players left standing from this season, adding a top 25 recruiting class, and who knows what the rank will be after they fill those other 2 holes. So I think, and especially just when you look at Mike Boynton's personality, he's such an easy guy to root for. I think I'm saying that as a guy who's worked pretty closely with him over the last 2 seasons. He's a guy who has a great persona, even though he's not an Oklahoma State guy. He has the personality, the persona of one. So I think he fits in really well in Stillwater. And I think that's why, even amid a 12-20 season, there was a lot of reason that people were excited. This wasn't the same vibe as a Travis Ford 12-20 season. For whatever reason, Travis Ford just never really connected in Stillwater. But Mike Boynton really hasn't seemed to have that issue after the initial, who is that? After his hiring, I think he's done a really good job of making his way into the culture in Stillwater and Oklahoma State.
And I want to bring that up on the media perspective because, I mean, you've covered things for a while, and you've been around a lot of Oklahoma State coaches as well. He is a guy, and it just seems, I mean, from a media perspective, it can't be better to work with a guy. The access is good. I mean, you guys ask, and usually you can get something. He says the right things. You can tell he's got passion. I would imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'll let you say it, but I would imagine it's probably one of the more refreshing coaches that you've been able to work with as far as writing stories.
Yeah, the transition from football season to basketball season is always an interesting one, going from Gundy to Boynton. But, yeah, he's a guy who's as candid as they come, extremely easy to work with. A lot of that credit, I got to shout out Stephen Howard, his SID, his communications guy who's been great in my 2 years on the beat for the Oklahoman. So, a lot of credit goes to Steven, but, Mike is just kind of a natural people person. He's always kind of just had that knack, it seems like, and it's shown in this role here. So, as a media member, you can't ask for much more than a guy who, when you ask your questions, he's going to give you an honest answer. He's really not too dodgy about anything, and his answers are usually pretty strong and thought out and good. So As a media member, there's not too much more you can ask for out of a coach.
Yeah, and like I said, I've always said the same thing. He's been really good at how he's handled that. Really thoughtful in what he says, but also candid. And to be honest with you, Nathan, that's kind of a delicate balance, when it comes to, being candid, but at the same time, kind of being respectful, not being short. I mean, he really does. I mean, if you had to grade him, there's things coaching wise that certainly he would tell you he's going to try to get better at. But if you're going to grade him as how he deals with fans and how he deals with media, you would give it an A+ on that, I would imagine.
Yeah, you just look at all the different involvement he's done. I mean, going down to Oklahoma City over the summer during the teacher strike, being out at Carson Creek during the golf national championship run. So, his involvement in Stillwater, in Oklahoma State, he does a really good job, I think, of committing himself beyond the basketball court. He recognizes that his responsibilities go beyond coaching basketball games. It's about, making these kids prepared for the future. It's about helping raise money for the program, helping alums be proud of the program. And I think he's doing everything he can in all those different areas to make sure he can do his job the best he can be.
Yeah, and, I'll bring up now, naturally, one of the places you work, Cauley, they had a nice article before the game on Tourney. Your co-worker, Barry Trammell, had a good article on after the game. And as we were sitting there after the game, Tourney, that was kind of the story yesterday. And it's always interesting. And I know when you cover a team and you see them as much as certainly you are, it's always interesting to see the progression of people, not only just in a year, you can see that, but also if you cover a team for an extended period, the years of progression it might be. And it seems, Nathan, that we're seeing something special develop with Tourney, and to see the progression that he's made this year and how he's played in the last 4 games, that is, it seems like Oklahoma State's got a special guy on their hand.
Yeah, he heads into that Baylor game. You're thinking, okay, at some point he's probably going to set the Oklahoma State freshman record for blocks. He was going to be right up there fighting for it. He wasn't too far off, and then he ends up in the last 3 games of the year coming away with 21 blocks in those 3 games alone. So he's a guy who, I don't know if he's going to be able to replicate that over a full season, but he's a guy that's going to affect a lot of shots, even the ones he doesn't block. I think he has some growth to do on the offensive side, and Mike Boynton will say that as well. But in terms of just natural defensive instincts, I don't know the last time Oklahoma State had a shot blocker like that. I don't know if they've ever had one like this where, if Tourney keeps up this pace for what he's done, I mean, as a freshman, he tied the program's blocks record, not by class, but overall. So he's a guy who already has as many 4-block games in his 1-year career, as Brian Reeves had in his 4-year career. Yep. So just statistically, he's been really impressive, and it's going to be fun to watch him grow over the next 3 years.
Yeah, the only guy I would say would compete with that would be Andre Williams, and that was the guy he tied this year. So, I mean, Andre back in the day was one great shot blocker, but it looks like through his stay, will probably shatter some records if he can not even continue on this pace, but stay somewhat close to this pace. He's going to shatter some records. Now, looking at Oklahoma State overall, and I want to get into some of what you're going to be doing coming up, but when you look at Oklahoma State overall, covering them this year, what is, and I know the depth issue is something you can't work on, but what's one thing that you've seen on the court that you think that maybe Oklahoma State's going to have to address to try to find themselves more consistently getting in the NCAA tournament? You've covered the last 2 years. What's like one thing that maybe you think the Oklahoma State Cowboys have to find a way to do better?
I think they need a guy, and that's kind of generic, but I think they need a bucket getter. I've talked about that with a couple other people on the beat. But, some days it was Zagua, some days it was McGriff, some days it was Likely, some days it was Lindy Waters. You look at the Texas Tech game. If Lindy Waters shoots that often every game, Oklahoma State might score a few more points over the course of the year. He's a guy who I think was just maybe a little too unselfish over the course of the year. And maybe Marcus Watson ends up being that guy, maybe Caleb Boone, Avery Anderson, one of those guys. Maybe they come in and onto campus and as a freshman, how to make that kind of impact. But I think I'm really fascinated to see how Isaac Likely in year 2 develops as a scorer, especially as a shooter, what elements Tom Zagua adds to his game. Cam McGriff and Lindy Waters are probably OSU's 2 most well-rounded players, Lindy Waters especially, so I'm fascinated to see how those guys develop as scorers. But I think if you look at, last year, there was Kendall Smith, who kind of every time they needed a clutch shot, he was the guy to take it. And I just don't know that this year's team had that guy. I think, we saw Lindy always be the guy to take the big shot, but they just didn't always fall. So I think, it'd be fascinating to see how he grows next year, his senior year, motivated. He went out there and said that he wants to hang a banner in Gallagher Iba Arena after next season. So, and that motivation is what you hope to hear out of a team senior. So I'm just interested to see how those three captains especially grow and develop as scorers, and if they can be that sort of, the guy.
Yeah. Talking to Nathan Ruiz of the Oklahoman. And, Nathan, I want to get into the Baltimore stuff, but first I know you're done with the Oklahoman as of now. You had your last story. Your last story was a Cowboy baseball. You've covered Cowboy baseball. What do you think about the Cowboy baseball team this year?
Yeah, they got a lot of depth. There's a lot of reason to be excited. A good mix in the lineup of veteran guys, freshman guys. Houston Murrill making a big impact early. Obviously, Colin Simpson seems to be coming around a little bit. So that's exciting. But, the pitching side should be really interesting. Brett Stanley was incredible in their midweek game. Obviously, you got Jensen Elliott and Mitchell Stone, who are two guys who were hurt last year, who are pitching pretty well to this point. So I think there's a lot of reason to be excited just when you look at depth on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I know one thing, and it's kind of baseball in general now, and I know you follow the sport well enough. You see a lot of big hits, home runs, but at the same time, you see a lot of strikeouts, and that's kind of something for Oklahoma State we've seen, and it's kind of been a theme over the past couple of years, but I don't think you may be harsh on it yourself, but it's kind of everywhere. A lot of the guys bring that bat to the rack quite often, but at the same time, those guys, next time up, could hit you a bomb that makes all the difference in the world. So it's kind of interesting where baseball is at as we kind of transition to what you're going to be doing, but it's kind of interesting where baseball is at on the side of the analytics becoming so important now and how they survey teams.
Yeah, I wrote about that. That was kind of the last story I wrote. Is Andrew Heaney, the 2012 Big 12 Pitcher of the Year, donated a TrackMan system to Allie P. Reynolds Stadium, and so that's something that allows them to tell spin rates and release rates and launch angles, all the stuff that they have access to at the major league level. And Jensen Elliott offered the example of he could see his release angle, his arm angle on his slider is different than his fastball, and that could be, even if it's a marginal difference, it's something a batter can pick up, and they know, oh, hey, a slider's coming here, a fastball's coming here. And so that's stuff that even Oklahoma State is using. It sounds like once O'Brate Stadium opens, it's going to be even advanced beyond that. Sounds like there's stuff they want to do but just held off on because they're going to only in ILP for one more year. But, Josh Holliday and Rob Walton, they all recognize, hey, this is really valuable stuff. This is the way the game is shifting. So not only will it help them develop the players for the major league level, it's also going to help them on the field.
Yeah, and you add a new stadium to that, and that just adds to everything going on with Oklahoma State. So now Baltimore going to be covering the Orioles. This has to be, for you, Nathan, this has to be in a way, who knows where the future is going to lie. But at this moment in your life, this has to be a dream come true to be able to cover a team, be able to go into a clubhouse and do what you love, writing about a sport you love.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I came to Oklahoma State was to be a baseball writer, get that sports media degree and get an opportunity like this. So it's definitely, like you said, a dream come true in a lot of ways. And I'm excited about the opportunity. Obviously, the Orioles are probably, in quite a bit of a rebuilding stage right now. So I'll be heading from a basketball team that struggles to probably a baseball team that's going to struggle. But, it'll be great. I'm sure I'll have a lot of opportunities to write really good stories, the same way I had those opportunities covering Oklahoma State. Covering Josh Holliday's team for the last several years, I think gave me a lot of great experience on what it's like to cover baseball. I got that experience a couple summers ago as an MLB.com intern covering the Padres. But, I don't think I would be where I am without the opportunities I've gotten both at the Ocali, at the Oklahoman, covering Oklahoma State, working with some great coaches, some great media coordinators. So I've had a lot of opportunities through Oklahoma State, and I wouldn't be in this position without them.
Yeah, and as a journalist, you're neutral. I mean, that's we always try to say you're neutral in a way of how you're writing. You're writing for the fans that are fans of that team, but you're trying to be objective. And even though that's the case, it's always more fun when your team that you're covering is winning. I often like to say that. It's a lot better to cover a winning team. And you talk about Baltimore. They're a team that it may be going to struggle a little bit. But the thing that has to be really cool for you, and we'll see what happens, if you end up staying out there a few years, you could be maybe you see something where you see this team maybe develop. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had for a journalist to kind of see a team in that mode and kind of follow that team and see them kind of build towards, making some postseason berths. I think that's the same way for Cowboy basketball. Covering that, you see the growth and you see kind of a foundation being laid. And I think as a journalist, that would have to be a lot of fun when you look at it, saying, "All right, yeah, there's going to be struggles, but at the same time, I'm seeing maybe the start of something that could be special."
Yeah, and I think you using the example of Cowboy basketball is a great one. Obviously, I think, Orioles fans, Cowboy basketball fans, they're going to hope to, maybe deal with a couple disappointing down years and then have things turn around. And I think Mike Boynton has the potential to do that. It'll be interesting to see how the Orioles do. But like you mentioned, if I stick around long enough, it'll be really interesting to see, how that organization develops. Obviously got new leadership in this year. They have a new GM, a new manager. And so there's a lot of change happening in Baltimore, a lot of change obviously happening in my life now. So, But the opportunity to cover this organization at this stage is an exciting one, and I'm curious to see how things kind of change and grow and develop over the next few years.
Well, we'll probably try to get in touch with you sometime, especially if any news breaks from out in Baltimore. And I'm sure, have you ever been to Baltimore before as far as anything you've done, or is this kind of how did this come about for you? Is it something you just kind of applied, wanted to get to the major league level covering that? But is it kind of a brand new world when you go into Baltimore, or have you visited it at least before?
Yeah, it's definitely just kind of an opportunity I saw and went for. I've been out to D.C. quite a bit, lived out in Virginia a couple winters ago, so I'm generally familiar with the area. Definitely have a lot of learning to do overall, but I think it's, from everything I've heard, it's a great city and I'll have a great experience.
Well, I guess we'll be looking for your first story. I'll make sure to try to May 25th, right? That's the official start date.
March 25th, so right before opening day.
Oh yeah, so 10 days. I'll be logging on, typing in, and see if I can't find any articles you've written about Baltimore. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. Well, have a good one. Enjoy this transition, and we'll stay in touch, man. I really appreciate your time today, and best of luck out there in Baltimore.
Yeah, Jordan, thanks. Really appreciate it.
All right, that's Nathan Ruiz, formerly beat writer for Oklahoma State for the Oklahoman, and now going to be covering the Baltimore Orioles, which I think is just really cool. And like you said, starting up in 10 days.